and happened, we didn't. Thank you. We'll get started today. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee hearing. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood. I represent Legislative District 2, Cass County, Eastern Lancaster. I serve as chair of this committee. We will start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Steve Erdman, District 47.
Warren Lippincott, District 34. Robert Dover, District 19.
Myron Dorn, District 30.
And there are senators absent who may be presenting bills in other committees, and some senators may come and go as we go through this day. Assisting the committee today is Tamara Hunt, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Clint Werner. Our pages today are Amelia from Hastings, a UNL student, and Kate from Kansas, a UNL student. At the entrance, you will find green testifier sheets on the table. If you are planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at the entrance where you may leave your name and related information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. For bills, the order of testimony will be introducer, proponents, opponents, neutral, and closing. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will first hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. With that, we will begin today's hearing with LB 560, Senator Blood. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon to the chair and the members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Senator Carol Blood. That is spelled C-A-R-O-L, B as in boy, L-O-O-D as in dog, and I represent District 3, which is the western half of Bellevue and eastern Papillion, Nebraska. Thank you for the opportunity to bring forward LB 560. LB 560 would require the state of Nebraska to apply for all available funds from the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA, passed by the U.S. Congress in 2022. While there are numerous aspects of the IRA which can provide benefits to the people of Nebraska, I am going to focus on two specific aspects which require the state to apply for funds in order to receive them. These two provisions are the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Program and the High Energy Whole House Rebate Program. Both of these programs are administered by the U.S. Department of Energy and require the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy to apply for funding. Approximately $91 million will be available to the state of Nebraska through these two programs between now and 2031. The HEE-HRA program provides funds for low to moderate income households to electrify their homes. It would provide grants of up to 100% of the cost of upgrades to low income properties with a maximum rebate of $14,000. Moderate income properties can receive up to 50% of the cost of the upgrade with a maximum rebate of $8,000. Eligible upgrades include heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, induction stoves, new wiring and breaker boxes, and funding for weatherization activities such as insulation, duct sealing, and weather stripping. For the purposes of this act, low income is defined as less than 80% of the area median income, and moderate income is defined as between 80 and 150% of area median income. The home program also provides rebates based on energy savings. Households at all income levels would be eligible to receive rebates. This program is more complicated, with the amount of rebate based on 2 factors: income and the measured performance energy savings based upon computer models. It will require a residential energy auditor or rater to determine the amount of projected savings, and will require the use of computer modeling based on current bills and the types of upgrades proposed. I'd like to note that requested funds can also cover staffing costs needed to implement the program. Households would need to establish energy savings of at least 15% in order to be eligible for rebates. A low to moderate income household, which has a projected energy savings of more than 35%, would be eligible for the maximum rebate of up to 80% of the project cost with a maximum rebate of $8,000. A higher income household with a projected energy savings of more than 35% would be eligible for 50% of the project cost with a maximum rebate of $4,000. The maximum amount of rebate for a low to moderate income household with between 20 and 35% energy reduction would be 80% of the project costs, the maximum rebate of $4,000. The maximum amount of a rebate for a higher income household with between 20 and 35% energy savings would be 50% of projected costs with a maximum rebate of $2,000. There are 3 significant reasons to support the state obtaining full funding through these programs. Number 1, if carried out in the way proposed, funds from these programs would enable more than 100,000 households to reduce their energy bills. This would make the homes of thousands of Nebraskans safer and more comfortable and provide them with additional money to pay for other things that would benefit the local economy. In addition, helping low-income people reduce their energy costs would help our public power districts by having fewer unpaid bills that have to be made up by the rest of their customer owners. Number 2, purchasing new heating and cooling systems, appliances, and insulation would generate millions of dollars in income for local businesses and contractors. Thousands of jobs would be created in communities across the state to install new heating and cooling systems, appliances, and weatherized homes. There would be a major economic multiplier from the original funds as local business owners, contractors, and workers spend additional earnings in their communities. The final economic benefit would be to the state and local governments in the form of additional sales and income tax revenues. Number 3, finally, these expenditures would be good for the for the environment. Moving to more electric heating and cooling systems and appliances and reducing overall energy consumption will result in reduced greenhouse gas emissions. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions if we're going to be able to mitigate the impacts of climate change, which has its greatest negative impact on agriculture, Nebraska's #1 industry. Speaking of ag, these grants would allow farmers to invest in soil conservation programs. These programs can utilize methods like cover cropping, crop rotation, and measures to reduce soil erosion, thus producing higher yields while curbing their carbon emissions. There would be a focus on transforming farms to be more drought resistant as well, which we know with climate change is an ever-increasing problem. Farms will dually become more energy efficient, lowering energy costs for farmers. The net benefits for Nebraska ag are lower emissions and soil preservation for future generations. I mean, I gotta be honest, the IRA is a large and complicated bill, but I've chosen to focus on those 2 aspects of the IRA, which require the state to apply for funds in order to receive them. And it is my understanding that if Nebraska fails to apply for these funds, the funds just go to other states, and we'll miss out on the benefits that we could have received if we had applied for them. The state can use up to 10% of the available funds for administration, although I question whether they would need to spend that much for that purpose. Potential uses of administration funds would be to contract with a firm to carry out the purposes of the Act and retain an official who would lead a public education and coordination effort to help people become aware of the programs and benefits available to Nebraska residents. LB 560 also lists other areas where IRA funding may be provided to the state or local political subdivision. The bill was drafted broadly with the intention of making sure that the state receives all the funds for which it may be eligible. At this time, I am not aware of other provisions of the IRA which require the state to apply for the funds in order to receive them, but want to make sure that the state is able to receive all the benefits available from this legislation. Now, one of our handouts today gives a blueprint of our eligibility for one of the programs within the Act. Omaha, being one of the most populous 67 cities, is eligible for $1 million in CPRG funding, which is part of the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically for targeting the reduction of emissions. So moving forward, I'd be glad to work with the committee to ensure that the state receives all the funds that's entitled to receive under the RRA. I ask that you advance LB 560 for consideration by the entire legislature. But I want to point something really important out. The deadline, because we got a later hearing, for the notice of intent is March 31st. And so at the very least, we can start a discussion and encourage the department, if we're not able to pass the legislation in time, to follow through on this. And that's one of the biggest intents today, is to bring light to the fact that we can leave money on the table if we don't act on this. And that would be really sad for our farmers and our ranchers and others in ag that would like to have the ability to benefit from these funds.
Very good. Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blood, for coming. And I just had a simple question. So the low income are eligible to replace their furnace, air conditioner. How are they, what kind of fuel are they using currently? That it would
What do you
be
mean?
different or better?
So they're encouraging people to go electric because there's fewer emissions with electricity.
So our air conditioners already are
But is your heat gas heat or is it electric? heat?
natural gas, but my understanding that that's not that's a clean.
Well, then they would
fuel.
probably not apply for the funds. It's for people that do not have items in their homes that are not considered clean energy, or for people who have items in their homes that are antiquated, that need to be updated, and they can be updated to clean energy.
But only if they're electric.
You'd have to look through it. I'm not sure. I just know that that's the way it was phrased in the information that we received.
Okay.
And there's people that are much more knowledgeable on this behind me. So the more complicated questions in reference to the very, very long piece of legislation that was put out by Congress would probably be better answered by them.
Other questions? Senator
Thank you,
Gilbert?
Senator Dorn, for waiting.
I'd like to know, do you know what the position of the Realtors and the Home Builders Association are?
Well, we've not received any information in our office about it as far as negative. I've not looked online to see what your comments are as far as pros and cons. That would be something I'm sure you've already done, but we've not received anything negative, so I guess we'll find out today. I would assume that they would be in favor of it since it benefits them as well.
Senator Erdman,
Thank you, Senator Clements.
positions.
Senator Blood, so let me be clear on this. So if they made an application to replace their furnace, they have to replace it with electric?
I'm not sure of that. That's why I'm saying you should wait for the details. I know that electric was one of the options when we put together our presentation for today.
Because we've done that in our home and it's almost twice as expensive as gas.
We have electric in ours, and ours is cheaper than our neighbors who has gas. So I think it just depends on the homeowner and the type of equipment that you have. And I'm not going to argue that you may very well pay more. And I'm not here to be a proponent of one thing over the other. I'm here to be a proponent of the fact that we have funds available to help people who may be struggling, and we can help them have better energy efficiency through this bill.
So how many funds, what's the total we're looking at possibly getting?
I think I said 19 million. Yeah, I said the actual amount.
Did you have a handout of your?
I gave several handouts.
I know you were reading a lot of numbers.
Oh,
off
yeah,
there, but I wasn't.
I don't usually hand out my presentation because what I find is the senators are usually staring at the presentation instead of listening to that presentation. So it's always been my personal choice to not hand it out, but I'd be happy to make you copies of this.
Are there other questions? I have one question. What state agency would need to declare an intent to receive this?
NDEE, because they're the ones that
NDEE?
would handle the programming.
Okay, I just missed that. Senator Dorn?
I was going to wait, maybe, thank you, Senator Clemens, but so in other words, the ag part of this, I'm familiar with this, because
Right.
that's already in the FSA offices or whatever, to apply for that, but the energy, the climate pollution reduction grants, is that such that we had the ARPA fund, not the ARPA funding, we had some funding a year ago that if we didn't personally, if the state did not apply for it, we did not get it.
Right,
No,
and we
that's the
have to
case
apply.
here.
No, that is the case.
That's
If
the
we
case
don't
here.
apply
Well, I
for it,
know
we
the
don't
ag
get it.
part, it's not that way. Because that's already in the county offices that you could apply for these.
But the rest of it, you have to
But
apply
the
for.
energy part, you do have to apply.
Right.
Thank you.
And Senator Armendariz, 91 million. I transposed my numbers.
91 million of
91
federal
million
funds.
is available to the state of Nebraska, and that's an approximate.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you, and we'll now welcome proponents for LB 560. Welcome.
My name is David Corbin, D-A-V-I-D-C-O-R-B-I-N, 1002 North 49th Street, Omaha. I'm a professor emeritus of public health from UNO, and I also taught energy policy at Creighton University. And I'm currently on an advisory board for the American Public Health Association Center for Climate, Health, and Equity. When I was president of the Public Health Association of Nebraska, I was able to work with the legislature at that time because the master tobacco settlement had millions and millions of dollars. At the time, Nebraska was not involved in that lawsuit. Fortunately, after much convincing, Nebraska did sign on to that. And as many of you know, that's about $40 million a year that we could have missed out on. I don't want us to miss out on this money, just like I didn't want us to miss out on that money. And unlike many other states with that tobacco settlement dollars, we spent it wisely because prior to that time, not everybody in Nebraska had a health department that served them. And because of the settlement money, we now have that in Nebraska. So, and that's been, like I said, about $40 million a year. So LB 560 would assure Nebraska would not miss out on the IRA money, and that states like ours actually would fare better than others. The American Clean Power Association pointed out that red states would receive about $4,200 a year, $4,200 per capita, and that's almost double what blue states would receive. The IRA funds would help improve public's health by decreasing air and water pollution. And according to the Nebraska Asthma Coalition, Nebraska, although has a lower asthma rate than other states in general, we have one of the highest death rates from asthma, and the pollution that could be reduced because of the IRA would help the public's health. This is one of the biggest bills that the state can benefit from in many ways, and you'll hear about agriculture and you'll hear about energy efficiency and all those things. I'm here to talk about the public health benefits. So right away, as you heard earlier, by March 31st, Nebraska needs to apply for the planning money, and they need to submit a letter of intent. Now, remember that this has to go through the NDE most likely for this first one. And the legislature last year approved money for a climate plan study for the state. So you already put money in this. This is much more money, that $3 million. And if you don't put in for that, you're not eligible for the next round. So it's like turning down millions and millions of dollars. And of course, at the same time, as we implement this, we're protecting the health of the citizens of Nebraska. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for being here and testifying. You mentioned red states get more than blue states. Why is that?
I think it's because of the fact that some of them have not had in their plans what some other states have. And so this tries to even the level the field of what some people perceive to be getting more from one part of the states than other, red versus blue. And this would kind of level that playing field to make it even.
Would it be appropriate to say that you're saying blue states have adopted some more of the technology than red states have, and we're trying to even that out?
Well, certainly, when it comes to public health things, like I said, in Nebraska, we didn't put much tax dollars into public health until we got that tobacco settlement. So it's a kind of similar thing. We were behind, and now we've caught up, and we've actually surpassed many other states because of the use of those funds.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there additional proponents for LB 560?
Good afternoon, Senator Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. This is my first time testifying before all of you.
Welcome.
My name is Al Davis, ALDAVIS. I am the registered lobbyist for the Nebraska chapter of the Sierra Club. I'm also here today representing the Nebraska Farmers Union as a board member of that organization. The Inflation Reduction Act was enacted into law in August of 2022. The bill is an all-encompassing piece of legislation with a great deal of money provided through grants to the states, tribal, and local governments. The Inflation Reduction Act seeks to transform the American energy structure by making investments in transmission, solar, and wind energy, battery, and storage systems, as well as significant investments in energy conservation through weatherization, tax credits to replace inefficient older furnaces and hot water heaters, etc. It is important that Nebraska step to the head of the line and focus our efforts on bringing these federal dollars to our state, rather than see them go to other states which are not as well positioned to use these dollars as we are. Although the bill was promoted by Democrats in Washington, it is Republican-controlled states which have the most to gain by being proactive in seeking these funds. Market Insider states that traditionally red states will gain $4,221 per capita from the IRA, while blue states will gain only $2,427 per capita. The funds are out there and available, but this body must do everything it can to bring these dollars to Nebraska. Nebraska is uniquely situated to generate investments in our state on top of the billions already invested here by the renewable energy industry. We rank near the top in wind energy potential and the top third in solar generation capability due to our clear skies and elevations in western Nebraska. These investments in Nebraska have already generated billions in invested dollars to the state, millions in income to affected landowners, and millions in property tax relief. The industry also offers good paying jobs to Nebraskans in parts of the state where job generation needs to be spurred. And as the nation transitions to electric vehicles, the IRA provides subsidies for the purchase of electric zero-emission trucks and buses for cities. Funds are available for significant investment in charging stations, which are essential if the nation hopes to transition away from fossil fuel vehicles. The IRA also includes funds to address water supplies in villages or cities experiencing droughts or concerned about the quality of their water. All across Nebraska, community solar may be added in almost every village or city, adding resilience to the grid while reducing the cost of energy for homeowners and businesses. These bills contain tight deadlines. The state can apply for a $3 million grant to develop a climate action plan, but that grant must be submitted by March 31st. And you already heard about that. There appear to be multiple opportunities for local governments to access funds to modernize, but they will need leadership from the state in working through these channels. Senator Blood's LB 560 asks the state to be a proactive participant in securing IRA funds for Nebraska, its local governments, its tribal governments, and its residents. This investment in Nebraska will pay dividends for decades into the future, and it is essential that we take this step today. Thank you, and I'll take any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz?
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks for being here today. And you sound like you probably know all of these questions I'm going to ask you. And I'm sorry, I don't know the federal grant program, so I'm going to ask questions about what it entails. So our public power, is that not fueled mostly by natural gas, some nuclear, and a little bit of coal here in Nebraska?
Yes, I don't know the percentages, largely coal and nuclear, and then some renewables.
So my brother-in-law worked for OPPD, and he said almost all of OPPD is natural gas as opposed to coal now, so.
I think that's true because they've been
He worked at the nuclear plant before it was closed down. So is this grant to support more wind energy? Can homeowners buy solar panels with it, or?
So I don't have all the fine details of the IRA, but yes, there are subsidies available for the installation of solar panels. I think I read somewhere they thought it might be about $7,000 per resident. You heard me talk about the money, and you had a question earlier about that. And I think one of the reasons that red states do better, well, for one thing, we've got Florida and Texas, which have a lot of population. California has taken a lot of steps to deal with solar and try to control fossil fuels. So those other two big states have not done as much, so they're kind of in the loop. And the red states actually just have more potential to generate kind of wind and solar that's necessary.
So is natural gas as clean as you would like it to be? I don't know, as an energy source,
So natural gas is largely methane gas. So
Okay.
it's not viewed as a very clean fuel. It's better than coal because it doesn't have the emission issues that coal has, but it's not viewed as good as, solar or wind. They're total renewables.
So then I'm a senator in Omaha, so how would OPPD generate power if they mostly use natural gas?
Well, I think there are going to have to be other alternatives. As time goes by, we're going to see more battery supplements to come in. I've read a lot about different ideas about essentially making a solar battery, a massive solar battery that you manufacture by sort of focusing the solar rays onto a body of sand, really, heating it up. So that becomes a storage method. But there are a number of different technologies in the works.
And that's preferable to the natural gas generation?
Well, it depends on how you feel about, climate change. If you feel that climate change is an issue, which the Sierra Club does, then we think we need to make the sacrifices necessary to get there so that we don't burn the planet up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Davis. Additional proponents for LB 560. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Terry Langan, TerryLangan. I'm an engineer and consultant. I've worked in many of the power facilities here in the state. It is true that OPPD used to generate a majority of its power from natural gas. They have made commitments to become fully renewable, as well as LES and NPPD. 2030, 2040, 2050, the state of Nebraska our public power sectors have already made those commitments. I'd like to thank Senator Blood for introducing this opportunity for us as a state to reach out and get these funds. In addition to lower energy costs for homeowners, some rebates, and it's on a sliding scale dependent upon income. So 50 to almost 100% of the costs of new appliances in your home, electric appliances in your home, can be refurbished back to you through a rebate or a tax credit program. 30% tax, 30% for renewable energy installations on private homes, solar, wind turbines. But what really interests me is the opportunity for good paying jobs, our rural sector. In 2021, we had 18,800 Nebraskans that worked in clean energy jobs. The IRA will expand these opportunities with an estimate of $24.5 billion of investment by 2030, the end of the term of the bill. These credits include bonuses for prevailing wage job businesses so Nebraskan workers can earn a good paycheck. As far as our manufacturing sector, these are in addition to the two components. And in the handout, you can see the numbers on some of the other programs in the bill. The two that have the deadline through the NDEE RDE of Nebraska that the senator's bill are for residential applications. But all these other monies are also available to us here in the state. For manufacturing, we have 99,000 Nebraskans working in manufacturing. The Advanced Industrial Facilities Deployment Program, which is intended to lead the world in production of clean steel, aluminum, and cement. The IRA will help us make technology of the future here in the United States, strengthening our supply chains and local economies while lessening our reliance on China. American-made clean technology. For our small businesses here in the state, over 180,000, 99% of our businesses in Nebraska are considered small businesses. There are commercial building owners, it makes them eligible for up to $5 a square foot to support efficiency improvements for their buildings. Tax credits covering 30% of solar installations, also for buying clean trucks, vans, and transportation for their fleets. For our rural sector, some of the programs here on this handout, the conservation-based ag programs, which will reward our 45,000 farmers for their stewardship through EQIP, RCPP, CSP, will provide our farmers a consistent source of funding over the next 10 years, no matter commodity prices. And that's money straight into these rural communities. It elevates the price of CRP, land in some areas, smart timber management. If you have timber on your property, you can get paid for preventing buildup of what people do anyway, picking up your logs, collecting your firewood. You can actually receive federal incentives. For our rural fire departments, there's direct money available to fund in some of our communities that are hurting from a restricted tax base from people moving away. There's direct money to help fund our firefighters to help fight some of the fires we saw last year and the year before out west. So if Nebraska were to maximize the potential of all of the IRA funding available to it, Nebraska homes could realize up to $1,800 a year in just energy savings on their bills, $11,000 in incentives per household, an additional $6,300 in tax credits. By the end of the IRA, Nebraska could realize up to $6 billion of investment in just the electrification portion, generating 10,000 new jobs and over 35,000 direct new jobs in the state. And I have been in conversations in this body, the city council, the governors, at the university, all concerning how do we retain talent in this state? How do we keep people in this state? And I think this is an excellent opportunity for our state to create these programs, create the jobs that will keep people here. And also for a livable world, cleaner air, cleaner water for our future generations. So I encourage you to pass this along.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for being here. And I know you introduced yourself addressing the Renewable Energy Initiative, the OPPD and LES. And I did hear about it, so I didn't read it myself, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to being corrected. My understanding was that program would cost $8 billion.
Just for OPPD?
Yes.
Their
And
conversion?
then, and then how would you suppose that would get paid for? Would they not increase rates to help pay for that?
That is that's the business model of public. Whatever they incur, they pass on to their.
So then I'm
their
wondering,
ratepayers.
are we really saving
Well,
money transferring over to an $8 billion project that's going to be put on then the ratepayers?
Sure.
Per kilowatt hour will go up, no doubt. And we have some of the lowest in the country,
Right.
right? And
Yes, we do.
that's what we love about Nebraska, and actually it brings a lot of economic development, by the way,
Mhm.
right? All these large data centers know that.
Sure.
So that's not a mistake that they come here. And I had a daughter living in Hawaii, completely different scenario. And she couldn't run an air conditioner in Hawaii. It was so expensive.
Yeah.
So it is a big draw to Nebraska to have those low rates. So I'm really kind of concerned if we're even the moderate rates across this country compared to what we are now, are we driving those businesses away that do like to come here for our low energy rates? And energy is really important to business these days. So it's a really big concern to mine if we're cranking those rates up per
Sure.
kilowatt hour, might drive businesses to
Yeah,
any other state that would be comparable.
that is a concern. And when I worked at Facebook, that was part of their commitment to move to Nebraska, was Nebraska's commitment towards renewable energy. The price of renewable energy is now lower than the price of fossil fuels. If it weren't for subsidies, we would not use coal at all. So over time, when you build a solar farm or put solar on the roofs of your houses, after your cost of installation, you have no further inputs. So you're not paying to transport gas or to mine or any of those externalities that usually get passed on to us, unfortunately. So that has been the commitment. That is why OPPD, MPPD, and LES have moved in that direction and committed to that movement. Is not just for the environmental benefit, the health benefits, but also financially. Because once those systems are in place, there are upkeep and maintenance jobs available in those areas, but it's quantitatively different than the way that we are currently sourcing our energy here in the state. So we end up saving money. So kilowatt hour prices go down for consumers.
So you're saying OPPD would reduce their revenues once they move to this?
Their revenues,
Correct. They would charge people less.
that is my understanding, yes. For $8 billion. So for instance, Cooper Nuclear Station, when I worked down there, or Blair, to build a new nuke plant, you're looking at getting in there $5 billion. The one down in Georgia was estimated to be 10, and now it's up to 33, and it's still not online. 33 billion to build one nuclear facility. We can do it better. We can do it smarter, more efficient, make our state more resilient, and overall.
Oh, yeah, I'm all for it if our rates are going down.
Right. So yes, and natural gas is not a clean fuel. That's nothing natural about it. It's methane gas pulled from the ground that you burn. When you burn it, you get nitric oxide, carbon monoxide. It's poisonous. And the reason, we use it because we've always used it, but it's dangerous. And if you have electric appliances, you reduce the danger of carbon dioxide poisoning.
But only if the electric is generated by wind or nuclear,
That is a curve.
not natural gas.
That is a curve that we will have to overcome. Yes.
Or
If
solar,
everybody
I
went to
guess.
electric cars right now, we would actually be using more coal than we are currently. So we have to, and that is the intention of this legislation, is to build grid scale. What the gentleman from Sierra Club is referring to, in Moss Landing in California, it was an old coal plant right on the ocean. They retrofitted it to be a battery storage facility, and now it's a wildlife preserve. The slough where they used to discharge into the water is now the big bird sanctuary, but they essentially took the whole footprint of the plant and filled it up with batteries, and they used their solar and wind capability to charge those batteries during the day, and that powers all of Monterey County up into Santa Cruz County into Salinas Valley, and that's been functional for over 15 years. So the technology has been available. It's the political will, and that has been lacking in some parts of the country. And this money is the intention of that, is to help us facilitate these operations in the red states who, haven't taken those initiatives.
Senator Erdman?
Yes, sir.
Senator Clemens, thank you. So recently, when it got cold there in California, they had that issue. They were having difficulty having enough power, and they asked people to turn the thermostats down. So how does the solar work at night, or if we have a long extended period of cloudiness? How's that work?
There is a colleague, a gentleman who is far more intelligent than I. His name is Saul Griffith. He wrote a book called Electrify. It's very easy to follow. Essentially, you have to look at the whole country. You build your energy generating capacity about 20% over your total load. So when the sun goes down on the East Coast, the West Coast is providing that increased load, because when people come home from work, they do their cooking, cleaning, their energy load goes up. It is a distribution issue, and what California has run into is everyone has solar. Solar's all over the place.
We had that same distribution problem here a couple of years ago in the wintertime when we had the rolling blackouts. Remember those?
Yeah, down in
And
Texas.
Germany tried this with going all solar and they had an issue and they're coming back to other fossil fuels and things that are reliable. Because what happens when you have solar and wind, when they don't work, then you have to kick in the natural gas or coal. You know, so, and the other issue we have is you talk about CO2 and capturing CO2. CO2 is 0.04% of our atmosphere, 0.04%. Without CO2, you and I don't exist. Without CO2, we don't have any plants. And 2 years ago, we decided that we were going to capture CO2 and pump it into the ground. And it was the most obscene hearing I've ever listened to in my life. And I thought, for surely, we won't do anything this stupid, and we did it. And the vote was 48-1, okay? And so I happen to be the one. This capturing CO2 is a pipe dream. And when we have CO2 capture, we have no idea when we pump it in the ground when it's full, or when it escapes, or anything like that. So all this solar talk and all this clean energy amounts to this. We're gonna have blackouts and we're gonna have to go back to coal and natural gas, something's reliable. That's my opinion. I can't see any possible way that this makes any sense if you have common sense at all. None of this stuff makes sense.
Well, I agree with you that carbon capture it's just it's a subsidy program for ethanol companies to continue their business as usual. It's unproven, it's dangerous. It takes actually more terawatts of electricity to compress carbon dioxide into a liquid and then transport it into a pipe that, if you look through Mississippi, one exploded. It's a mile-wide gas bomb, like a World War II gas attack. It's unbelievable. I argue, I would answer your skepticism by asking you to turn to the policy wonks in our public energy sectors who do the numbers on this every day and look at their commitments and what they have committed to and how they will transition it to a zero carbon economy here in Nebraska. They will continue their nuclear generation, increase gas supply as those renewable energies are able to handle the overages in the total grid. So that's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take money, and the money is available. You know, there is a lot of money available, a lot of investment available from the federal government that, in my opinion, I think Nebraska should benefit from.
Senator Dorn, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Clemens. I would disagree with your comment there that the ethanol people are only here because of the carbon issue. My local ethanol plant down there, they've been capturing CO2 for years, and it all started because PepsiCo and companies like that needed to make their pop. So most of theirs gets used in other entities that we have here already and that we're using here. So that's not the only thing for it. And we as farmers that raise corn, and I've farmed all my life, we do more to get rid of CO2 with our cropping practices than anything else. So that's part of that ethanol also. One other thing I'll disagree with you, you said that coal companies wouldn't be here today if it wouldn't be for their subsidies they get. I will also say that electric, wind, solar, without subsidies, we wouldn't be having them at the cost we're having them. Part of these programs you have, that is because of federal subsidies that we're getting. My question to you, you gave the one here for agriculture,
Yes.
and you gave all that money, and it says 20 billion. Is that for the state of Nebraska, or is that for the total amount?
This would be on this sheet.
Yes,
This is the total current amounts
from the
allocated
federal government.
from the federal government for these programs.
Do you happen to know what our state amount is?
On which
What our state might get,
for rural ag,
Nebraska, from these programs here?
we have the potential of $6 billion income.
Not in the state of Nebraska, you don't, not out of the 20 billion.
Well, the investment portion over a 10-year program, so the IRA goes till 2033. And I'm a huge fan of farmers. I come from farmers too. We grew corn and beans also. I didn't mean to offend you in any way.
Part of the problem with this program is I farm, I have young kids, or my nephews and son, they've been in to talk to these programs. We have been doing cover crops for more than 10 years, 25 to 40% of our farm ground. And yet this program, because we've been doing it, they won't fund us for anything. But if we never did an acre of it, they would fund you. So that's part of this program that I have an issue with. Why not help support us that have been doing this for years? We know what to do. We've improved the quality of everything, and yet this whole program is to start new. It's not to help improve what we already have. So, yes, sorry, I didn't mean to go off.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. The money available for farming, the no-till practices, the cover crops, you can submit into these programs for reimbursement you can.
We already have, and they have told us because we are now doing it, we're not new. We have done, since I was in high school 50 years ago, we've done no-till on our farm.
Thank you.
And we would never go back the other way. And yet, because we're doing these programs, we have been in to apply, and they have told us, no, you're already doing them, you're not eligible for the grant, it's just new.
You're ahead of the curve, sir.
Well, I know we're ahead of the curve,
Appreciate
and I agree 100% they need to get more involved in it, that's not the issue. But because we're doing it, they say, no, thank you for doing it, and then they don't help you either, so
Well, I'm sure
I apologize for that.
No, I'm sure you see a lot of your neighbors that do not do what you do. And
Probably a lot of them do it.
What?
I'm guessing a lot of your neighbors do.
Most of my neighbors in Gage County, Nebraska, over 90% of them do it.
yeah,
Sorry, thank you.
And
I'm done.
and Senator Dorn, the fiscal analyst, has told me that 91.3 million was quoted. 45.8 million would be whole home rebates, is that what that says?
Mhm.
Yeah, and 45.5 million high efficiency appliances.
That's the energy part of it.
Mhm.
Yes, I was talking about the agriculture part of it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree with the energy part of it, yes.
I do have a spreadsheet. I can get that to you.
But on here, it says that 20 billion is available for agriculture. Well, not 20 billion in Nebraska.
right. Okay, I see where this is the total for the country.
That's
Yes,
a
sir.
total for the country.
Yeah.
And these we don't have to ask for because these are already coming to our federal offices in each county. These monies are already there.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, Senator Blood's,
Yeah.
her amendment
Is more energy part. But she
Yes.
handed this
What
out
needs it.
also, or a similar type of this, she handed out. So that's why I thought it was for both of them.
It's a encompassing
Yeah.
giant piece of legislation for sure.
All right. We'll have the fiscal office provide a spreadsheet for the committee. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 560? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Clements. My name is Kenneth Winston, Kenetwinston. I'm appearing on behalf of the Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light supports LB 560. Many faith traditions support care for the earth and caring for people, particularly the poorest and most vulnerable among us. LB 560 represents both elements by directing the state to seek funding for programs that help people reduce their energy usage, which will in turn reduce their energy bills and their greenhouse gas footprint. There's funding available for all income levels, but we particularly appreciate the fact that there's funding available for low-income households, who often have the greatest need and the least ability to address the challenges they face. Numerous studies have found that low-income people spend a significantly greater amount of their household income on energy costs than people with higher incomes. And there's the reasons for that are obvious. Low-income people often live in homes which are poorly insulated and have leaky windows and other things that allow that air to come in and out of their homes. Because of their income challenges, they struggle to pay the high energy bills they face. High energy bills impact their ability to pay other bills. The energy burden of Black, Latin, and other minority households is typically higher than other households. In addition, many rural households struggle with high energy costs. LB 560 seeks to address this ongoing challenge. These funds can also expand the reach of the weatherization programs that programs like Community Action and Habitat for Humanity do. These weatherization programs typically have a waiting list for people seeking assistance. While these funds can be used for home energy improvements, they will also lead to economic benefits in the form of jobs for contractors and laborers, and spin-off benefits in the form of additional money for the local economy. Additional money in the local economy will also generate tax revenues for both the state and local communities. Reduced electric bills can also benefit our public power districts by reducing the number of people who are unable to pay their bills. LB 560 is relatively straightforward. It just directs the state to seek funding that it's entitled to receive, and this funding is intended to benefit the people of the state. It's also important to note that the state can use up to 10% of these funds to pay for administration, which could include contracting with a private entity to educate the public about these programs and carry them out. We would encourage the committee to advance LB 560 so that it can be adopted by the entire legislature. And if I may, I'd like to respond to a couple of things that have been.
You still have some time.
Okay, thank you. There are some questions about the renewable energy portfolio of some of our public power districts. I've spent a lot of time working with our public power districts. The Lincoln Electric System's current renewable portfolio is around 45 to 48% on a regular basis. And they also have very low rates. LES actually has the lowest rates of the major utilities in the state. And I know that reliability is a concern, but as Mr. Langen indicated, they've got people on staff who are very dedicated to reliability. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, requires them to maintain a certain level of reliability. So they're very concerned about that. So our electric, they will make sure that we keep our lights on. Also, OPBD is currently, they range from about 30 to 35% renewable energy at the present time. And they've retired 3 units of their coal plant in North Omaha. And they also retired Fort Calhoun nuclear plant. But they've invested a lot in wind energy in particular. They have over 1,000 megawatts of wind energy. And I agree that the funds available, that low rates are very important. Not only they're important for business, but they're also important for people throughout society. I mean, low-income people in particular, we need to make sure that we keep our rates low. And I guess one other thing I wanted to mention, 2 other things about LES. They have one of the highest reliability records in the country. The average time for an outage in the country is about 2 hours, 120 minutes. LES, their average outage is 17 minutes. So you can do, and they also have the lowest rates of the major utilities in the state of Nebraska. So you can have low rates, you can have reliability, and you can have renewable energy, and they can all work together. And they've got good people, all our utilities have good people working for them, people who are experts in this area, and I think they're doing an excellent job. And I'm not being paid by them. so it's just I've spent a lot of time attending the meetings and working with people with those organizations, and I have a great deal of respect for them. So I just wanted to address those.
That's the time, sir. Is there a question? Senator Dover?
Just briefly, so you said that renewable in LES is 45%.
That's correct. Between 45 and 50% on a regular basis.
What kind of capacity do they have in reserve then?
I'm not sure what your
Yeah, I apologize if I don't know the terminology. So basically, if 45% is being generated by renewable sources, that means that obviously it's a continual thing, right? Electricity just always has to kind of be there and flowing, and it's on or off.
Exactly.
And so, say 65% of it is being coal or whatever it may be as far as other energies non-renewable. Then let's just say that 45% goes away. What capacity do they have in reserve to make up for those renewable, that 45% of whatever renewable energy?
Yeah, they make sure that they have that capacity, so they're always covered. But part of what they make sure that they're covered is, as Mr. Langen implied, it's by being connected to the grid so that there's other electricity that they can obtain
Oh,
from
so they
other
purchase
sources.
from other sources?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me now.
But they do also have, they've got contracts with coal plants in Nebraska and Iowa and Wyoming as well.
I'm good, that filled in the missing piece. Thank
Other
you.
questions from the committee?
And one other, I'm sorry, if I can just expand on my answer. They also have wind generation in 3 different states, in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, so that if the wind's not blowing in Nebraska, it might be blowing in Oklahoma or Kansas. So thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Then we'll go on to our next proponent for
Thank you. for
LB
the opportunity
560.
to speak to you.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. My name is David Holtzclaw, DAVID HOLTZCLAW 5005 Chicago Street, Omaha, Nebraska. Before I start, I will say at the end, I might be the best person to answer some of your technical questions regarding this bill. Today, I'm testifying in support of LB 560. The Inflation Reduction Act is one of the largest domestic job creation bills in over 75 years. Like many U.S. federal policy initiative, it uses U.S. tax code as a primary vehicle for industrial change. It is an all carrots, no sticks approach, and by that I mean the bill has little to no requirements for utilities, municipalities, or states, but just incentives. Princeton University and the Energy Innovation Lab predicts the IRA will recruit between 1 and 1.5 million jobs in the U.S. by the end of 2030. It is vital for Nebraska to be active, engaged with the federal government to ensure Nebraska gets its fair share of the IRA pie. As previously mentioned, there are 2 programs, the High Efficiency Electrical Home Rebate Program and the High Energy Home Rebate Program that requires the State Energy Office to apply. These applications must be submitted by the end of 2025, and the letter of intent must be submitted by the end of this month. Currently, Nebraska has allocated $91 million in both programs, total of both programs through 2031. At least half these funds are targeted low to moderate income recipients and specific allocations to rural population. So I'm going to repeat that: specific allocations to LMI, rural, and tribal populations. Blueburn reported on February 6th of this year that the IRA has already created over 100,000 new jobs. Climate Power identified 90 new clean energy projects in 31 states, totaling approximately $90 billion. The 7 states that have gotten the most investment to date: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. Why are these 7 states getting so much productivity? Not 100% sure, but I can tell you of the 11 webinars, requests for information, and public inputs by federal agencies that I have attended, they were all there with multiple employees speaking on their behalf. Of those 11 webinars, requests for public information, and RFIs that I attended, I was the only person from Nebraska. Our engineering firm is currently receiving 3 to 5 inquiries about the IRA per week. We have advised 11 developers, 4 nonprofits, 6 home builders, 1 utility, and countless citizens on how they can best take advantage of the IRA. I have emailed NDEE and sent phone calls over 6 times requesting very simple questions like, are you going to apply for the homes and HERA programs? Who's the point person for the IRA at NDEE? Will these programs be managed in-house, or will you hire a third-party contractor to manage them? The White House has required the identification of a point person or state czar for the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act programs. Who is that person for Nebraska? Who's going to be that person for Nebraska for the IRA? These states have already made these appointments. In January, the state of Ohio public put out a call for jobs, advertising 6 new positions in their energy office for people to manage their IRA program. Several states have done this. If Nebraska wants its fair share of the pie for the next 10 years, then they need to be more actively engaged with the 11 different federal agencies that have this funding. This is necessary for us to get our fair share of the federal tax dollars. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Another question from the committee, Senator Armendariz.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Can you tell us what firm, you said you had your firm?
Like
calls?
Transaction Technologies. We're a mechanical engineering firm, and we do a lot of efficiency, high performance, residential, commercial, industrial buildings. We do a lot of consulting regarding the energy sector, how to lower your energy consumptions, net zero, those types of things.
So again, I don't know about this bill, this act, these funds. So it's titled the Inflation Reduction Act. How does this reduce inflation?
So what it does, well, in the direct part, is it reduces inflation, but it lowers people's energy burden. So depending on your income levels, your energy burden can vary from 3% to 22%. So at the end of this 10 years, energy will be cheaper across the country.
Will it go up
No.
during the interim?
No.
It'll stay the same, then go down
Correct.
for Nebraskans across the board,
Yes.
if we get this money.
Yes.
So I guess my only concern, and I'm not an economist, but my understanding is, so there's your federal funds being injected into our economy. And I hear over and over all the jobs created, right? The installers of the appliances and HVAC systems. But my understanding is that's why we are in such high inflation now, because of government injection of funds into our economy.
That is I don't know if there's any one right answer to that.
Okay.
I mean, that's like an hour-long seminar on federal. I don't know if you can give an answer. There was a lot of money put in the economy through the COVID period, okay? Some of that did lead to inflationary, but that also increased to a high number of jobs. So our employment is still low. So there's good and bad. This is a different program, not dealing with the same program, the COVID, response. This is spread out over 10 years with funding coming in at regular intervals.
But these funds create these jobs.
These funds are to help build industries that will be self-sustaining.
So is it kind of similar to government jobs then?
No,
So what private sector will be involved in paying these new
so a
jobs?
lot of these incentives are done through the tax code. So over 60% of the IRA is done through tax incentives. So somebody has to purchase something, install something, build something, and then their savings is coming from tax incentives that they get when they file their taxes. So these are all independent dollars that are going to provide the incentives, just as we do for low-income housing tax credits, just like we do for pretty much every industry in this country, right? Everything's efficiency is driven through the tax code, which is why we have 17,000-page tax code.
Yeah,
So that's what we're driving through, is we're using tax code to incentivize private industry to do X, Y, Z.
So like when I got a new air conditioner, I was eligible for a tax rebate if it met a certain threshold of energy efficiency.
If that was the case, sure.
So it's administered the same way the homeowner would get those rebates if they install the appliances.
So the rebate goes through the tax, through the IRA, or the IRS. So if you install it in your building or your property or your rental or whatever the case may be, you, being the owner, would claim that tax credit when you filed for your taxes for that.
So would these low-income people have to pay for these appliances up front?
It could be the owner, right? So tenants, low to moderate income tenants, those properties also qualify. So the owner who has low to moderate income tenants can make these upgrades, and the owner can qualify those tax incentives.
And then they would pay cash up front for the appliances and wait for it to come.
They would
back.
pay cash up front regardless, because
But
all the money.
low-income people with a low-income home, they would have to pay for it and wait for the incentive to come back to
Correct,
them
and then they
at
would
the
get
end
the
of the year.
incentive back. Now, those are for the tax reductions. HERA program and the homes program are rebate programs. Those are driven through the state energy office, NDEE, that will either manage it or hire a third-party contractor to manage it. And those are rebates. So after you purchase and install and you submit your paperwork to NDEE, they will cut you a check of whatever the dollar amount for that rebate is. So those are not tax incentives. Those two programs are rebate programs.
Gotcha.
But the majority, 60% of the IRA, are tax incentive programs.
Other
I
questions from the
get it
committee?
now that you have to have the money up front.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there additional proponents for LB 560? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Edison McDonald, EDISON, MCDO, and ALD. I'm with GC Resolve, and we support LB 560 as an opportunity to take advantage of the Federal Inflation Reduction Act to grow Nebraska farms, update our grid, and support the tribes in Nebraska. This bill comes down to ensuring that Nebraska gets its tax dollars back. Are there issues? Yes. Should it be, as Senator Dorn mentioned earlier, that farmers who are already using good practices get those funds back? Yes. But this is the program that we have. We have an opportunity to either have those dollars come back to Nebraska or to go to another state. In particular, we are very focused on ensuring that we pursue these funds for tribes, small, mid-sized energy development, and battery development. I want to start in talking about battery development and some of the pieces it brings. In our renewable energy development work, our customer base is significantly shifting. We've always worked mainly with family farms, small, mid-sized businesses, and tribes, but the motivations are shifting. While there have long been significant financial reliability and energy independence benefits, I always say, I don't care if you believe in climate change as long as you believe in a cash flow. We are now seeing more who are concerned about the impacts of foreign affairs on our markets, who want energy independence from energy they produce and control. This has particularly spiked our sales of batteries with solar systems here in the state of Nebraska. Included in the IRA, the federal investment tax credit will help most homeowners ensure that they can decrease the cost of a battery by an additional $3,000 to $4,000. While standalone storage has previously not been eligible for this credit, but it will be as of 2023, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. This will help to get over the hump, but not completely cover the full cost of those battery projects. As to the concerns mentioned earlier about reliability, I just want to say, I think people always question how reliable is solar. When the blackouts came, none of our clients lost energy at any point. Second piece I really wanted to dig into is tribes. We've developed projects for the tribes, and we know that they have significant interest in these funds. I think we are all still trying to figure out how, where, why, to figure out how we can work the mechanisms of the IRA, but we want to make sure we can bring back the maximum investment to Nebraska possible. The bill ensures that we can bring those funds back and help to support Nebraskans. In particular, for tribal members, two programs that would be very beneficial: the Qualified Low-Income Economic Benefit Project. A facility could be treated as part of a qualified low-income economic benefit if at least 50% of the financial benefits of the electricity produced by such facility are provided to households with an income of less than 200% of the poverty line or less than 80% of an area median gross income. The second program is the Tribal Electrification Program. In addition to amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated to the Director of the BIA for fiscal year 2022. Out of any money in the Treasury not already appropriated, $145.5 million to remain available until September 30th of 2031 for the provision of electricity to unelectrified tribal homes through zero-emission energy systems, transitioning electrified tribal homes to zero-emissions energy systems, and associated home repairs and retrofitting necessary to install the zero-emission energy systems authorized under the program. I hope that you will move this bill forward so that we can bring back that investment to Nebraska farms, update our grid, and help to support the tribes in Nebraska. With that, I'll close. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? Could you remind me who you're representing? Because
GC Resolve.
TC?
G.
G.
Yeah,
GC.
we work with farmers, tribes, businesses to help really kind of grow and develop Nebraska.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 560? Welcome.
Good afternoon. Hi. My name is Eric Moyer. That's E-R-I-C-M-O-Y-E-R, resident of Lincoln, Nebraska. I actually reside in this Wishards district. I'm happy to say I grew up in Robert Dover's district up in Madison County. Been in Nebraska the majority of my life. I'm a huge proponent for this bill. I can't say it enough. It's hugely beneficial. My day job, what I do for a living, how I earn a paycheck, is I install solar power systems. I did this previously for the last 6 years for my own company, and now I do that for another employer. The point being why I am so in favor of this bill, it's not because of the solar panels. It's not because of batteries that I install. I mean, sure, that's fantastic and great. That's not really the focus of what I think Senator Blood has done presenting this. It's instead looking at energy optimization, energy improvements for existing homes, looking at insulation, windows, doors, HVAC improvements. These things are incredibly important. No amount of solar panels can offset the amount of power consumed by by a home that is just consuming gratuitous amounts of energy. And some small homes in rural Nebraska end up consuming a lot more power than some of the more modern, larger homes that you might have in Lincoln and Omaha. I've seen it firsthand where a small home that's 1,200 square feet is consuming $250 to $300 a month in energy bills, whereas a 1,800 square foot home in Lincoln is only consuming about $110 to $150 per day of electricity. So what it all comes down to is leaky windows and doors and a lack of insulation. Being able to address those issues, especially when these are homes that are owned by, for example, income opportunities, like it's a rental, for individuals in that situation, there's no benefit to the rental owner to make improvements on that home. It's not their bill, but that house is still consuming a whole lot of energy that could otherwise be going to other sources, helping to do things like charge vehicles, helping to do things like keep the lights on at a school or at a factory, or help reduce the cost of electricity for irrigation. So those things are really, really important. I think they're important to me. They should be important to you. And I'm sure they are. Also, as far as the work that I do, just kind of put this in perspective. When we do a solar installation, I've got 4 guys directly employed with me doing a solar installation on a home. Okay, there's 4 guys right there. There's 4 jobs. There's an electrician and a journeyman or an apprentice that also comes to do that job. Then along with that, there also had to be an engineer that was employed to put a stamp on that project before we could even come on out. And then of course, the utility is going to swap out the meter. All told, there's probably about 20 to 25 people that touch a project, each and every project. Those are jobs for local guys, local people here in Nebraska, whether they're living in Crete, they're living in Lincoln, or they're living out in North Platte. These are local jobs. These are local projects. And this funding, this federal funding, if it supports that, you're keeping more Nebraskans employed. So thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 560? Welcome.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Shirley Niemeyer, and it's SHIRLEYNIEMEYER, Honorable Senators. I strongly support LB 560, an essential bill. I commend Senator Blood for her foresight and insight, and I thank you. Please enter the items that I am passing around into my testimony that I have submitted. And just a comment before I start, I have read a lot of research on solar and wind, as well as wave action, cellular action, all of these new things that are being researched for the future. And what we need to do is buy time now with what we have and solar and wind and their advancement until we get to some of these newer things. And wave action. Okay. The U.S. Department of Defense in 2010 states that climate change could have significant geopolitical impacts around the world, contributing to poverty, environmental degradation, and further weakening of our fragile governments. Climate change will contribute to food and water scarcity, will increase the spread of disease, and may spur or exacerbate mass migration. And we're already seeing these things happen. Political and social destabilization of a crowded, nuclear-armed world perhaps is the greatest and least predictable risk that will occur because of rapid climate change. The second thing, there is nearly 100% agreement among scientists that climate change is real. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that the global warming is accelerating and will reach, and this was earlier, at least 1 centigrade above pre-industrial levels around 2030, a full decade before previously. It's happening faster. It's going to happen faster than they previously thought. And third, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration on Climate Change, NOAA monitors global climate data. Global temperatures rose 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit from 1901 to 1920. Sea levels has accelerated 1.7 millimeters per year throughout most of the 20th century to 3.2 millimeters since 1993. Glaciers are shrinking. Average thickness of 30 well-studied glaciers have decreased more than 60 feet since 2080. The area covered by sea ice in the Arctic at the end of the summer has shrunk 40% since 1979. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has risen 25% since 1958 and 40% since the Industrial Revolution, and that's from NOAA. And then I'm going to make some comments about the other materials. There was a legislative resolution in 2020 that states the state of Nebraska has contributed to climate crisis and has done little to nothing to slow the effects. And this is a resolution. Therefore, resolve the members of the 106th legislature of Nebraska that the legislature acknowledges that we are in the midst of an anthropological climate change and ecological crisis, that the legislature has a moral obligation to take steps to combat climate and ecological crisis. And I give to you climate change impacts, which is from the national, and this is from the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, climate science and climate risk, And this is from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This was a letter I sent earlier, and I have some other materials. I just wanted to say in response to one thing or a couple things that have been mentioned, in Australia, the research has been done and they're developing batteries that store 4 times the amount of electricity that we currently have. And that is so important. And that gives me hope that we'll be able to address this, because I really worry about the children, our grandchildren, our children, and the future. It's significant. And I know most of you know about climate change, but in looking at this LB, I believe we need to move forward on this so that we can at least try to approach some of these things that are happening. It's really significant. And I appreciate your time and I thank you. And I hope that this bill passes.
Thank you, Ms. Niemeyer. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 560? Seeing none, is there anyone here in the opposition for LB 560? Is there anyone wishing to testify in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Blood, you're welcome to close.
So first of all, I want to apologize. I didn't know how many people were going to be coming today. I appreciate being brought forward since I have to leave early today. So I just wanted to put that out there and say that that was not my intent to take this long. I feel like we got a little off into the weeds today and start talking about utility plans and people's opinions on things that really have little to do with what this bill does. Here's the bottom line. We have an opportunity to utilize funds for the benefit of all Nebraskans, especially those that may be struggling. We have the opportunity with these funds to generate new jobs or to help people that have existing jobs keep their jobs. We don't have to use every aspect of the opportunities that are set out in the congressional bill. We can cherry pick what we would like to do and follow those guidelines and move forward with that. So perhaps we want to emphasize only the weatherization and making sure that people have the abilities to receive rebates if they decide to be more energy efficient. We know, Senator McDonald knows that very well, that when it comes to things like weatherization here in Nebraska, there are a lot of homes that can benefit from that. And there are a lot of people that save real money by weatherizing their homes. So we can't continue to leave money on the table when we have an opportunity that costs us nothing but the ability to ask for those funds and to follow through with those funds. We have the ability to do better. We have a small window of time, however, if we're going to do this. So either it has to be exec on and kicked out, and we can pray that we can maybe hitch a ride on something, or we can hope that NDEE, who I see is here, is hearing what we're talking about, and we'll go ahead and file our notion of intent. And with that, I thank you for your time today. I'm sorry I'm not an expert on the utilities and the types of utilities and our power plants, but as a state senator, I am an expert on trying to find funds to help move our state forward, as I know you are as well.
Any other questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Blood, this isn't your priority bill.
This is not my priority bill.
In light of how slow things have moved on the floor, even if we would advance this tomorrow, there's probably still no chance at all it'll ever get to the floor.
Well, Senator Erdman, you've known me long enough to know that I'm kind of a Pollyanna and that I have expectation that if we don't try, we can't do.
But just the reality is with the wasted time we're doing, you'll never see it. They'll never make it. Not by
I
much.
appreciate your opinion, Senator, but again, it's my job to keep trying.
Other questions? Seeing none, we do have position comments for the record. On LB 560, we have 72 proponents, 2 opponents, 1 neutral. And
Can I ask who the opponents were?
we'll get you a
Okay,
copy.
thank you.
That concludes the hearing on LB 560.
Thank you, Senator.
Welcome, Senator Blood. Now we're going to go back to the agency hearings, and I want to thank those members of agencies who have been waiting. Senator Blood had a schedule conflict and asked me this morning if we could hear her bill first. And because of the urgency of her need, I did agree to do that. So we will now open a hearing for Agency 16, Department of Revenue. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriation Committee, my name is Glenn White, Glenwhite, and I'm the Nebraska's interim tax commissioner testifying in support of your preliminary recommendation for Agency 16. We appreciate the committee's thoughtful work on the preliminary report. We want to emphasize that the Department of Revenue works hard to operate efficiently using technology to save on processing, printing, and postage, as well as to improve the customer experience. An example of DR's emphasis on efficiency is the request for a $200,000 reduction in appropriations for the motor fuels program 111 for the current fiscal year, as well as both years in the next biennium. This request for reduction in appropriations is a result of operating efficiencies achieved through streamlining, restructuring, and expanding the function for motor fuels staff to include excise taxes such as cigarette, tobacco, as well as severance and conservation taxes that show associated with the Revenue Administration Program 102, without any associated increase in appropriation for Program 102. The Homestead Exemption Program 108 is managed through the Department of Revenue. Per our request, you and the governor both recommended increases to the Homestead Exemption Program for the fiscal year 2023-2024 of $6.7 million and an additional $5.6 million for fiscal year 2024-2025. The increase in the Homestead Exemption Program is due to the expectation that more taxpayers will qualify for the program, together with the increase in home valuation. The $7 million annual transfer from the Tobacco Products Administration Cash Fund to the general fund is prudent based upon projected receipts and historical expenditures for that fund. The Property Tax Credit Cash Fund, Program 132, is also managed through the Department of Revenue. The legislature and the governor both recommended increases to the Property Tax Credit Cash Fund for fiscal year 2023-2024 to $360 million and $395 million for fiscal year 2024-2025. These increases help alleviate the financial impact of the valuation increases that homeowners have experienced. Continuing the quarterly $100,000 transfers to the Gamblers Assistance Program 164 will not adversely impact charitable gaming's operations. And in reference to the Compulsive Gamblers Assistance Fund, Program 164, it is my understanding that the Gamblers Assistance Program Director, David Geyer, is here today, and he does plan to testify following me with regard to that particular fund. Again, we support your preliminary recommendation for Agency 16, and I thank you, Chairman Clements, the committee, and the LFO staff for your continued diligent work on the budget. I am available for your questions.
Other questions from the committee? I wasn't clear as to, was there anything in the governor's recommendation that we did not adopt in your budget request?
I'm not aware of anything.
I wasn't sure about my notes. You talked about improved efficiency reductions, the $200,000. Was that in our initial budget hearing approval?
I believe it was. That was a recommendation from the governor's office.
Right, okay. I have, as a tax preparer, I have a comment I've been doing. I do appreciate the property tax credit lookup tool. I think it's very good. It could be a little bit better.
Yes, it can.
When I have a client with 10 properties in the same county, we do the lookup for the parcel ID and go back, and then we do another lookup. I have to put in the county name over again. And I would like for that county name to be pre-populated with the previous county that was entered. And it would just save another step. And I had communicated that to the department, but it would just make the workflow go a little bit faster. Actually, as well, we have to put in what year of the tax, what was the year of the tax and what was the year it was paid. If all three of those would be just pre-populated when you come back for another property, it's not very common that people have property in multiple counties, although they do have some, and I have had that, but I'm able to make a change if it's pre-populated with my county and they happen to have a different one. But no matter what county it is, I have to input it every time.
So when you go into one property, you would like to see the fields, or at least some of the fields, pre-populated for potentially the next property. So you're not
Yes.
re-entering that.
Because typically people pay all of their 2021 tax in 2022 in the one county.
Yeah.
And if the year of the tax bill, the year of the tax payment, and then the county name, it would be helpful just to make it go a little bit quicker. Otherwise, that's a fairly small complaint or suggestion, because the tax lookup tool has been well appreciated by the tax preparers.
Yeah, and one of the main things we've done for tax preparers was to create a system where the software can pick up the stuff from the lookup tool itself without you having to go to the lookup tool, getting the information, and then putting in the software. So the software itself, we have some software providers who are doing that now, where you just put in the ID number and then it pulls it all from the lookup tool.
I'll have to ask my software provider about that. Well, that didn't really affect your budget, just while you were here. I wanted to mention, thank you. Oh, Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. So you mentioned the homestead exemption and the valuations going on. Are more people reaching the limit on their valuation, they don't get a full homestead exemption?
That I don't know. We're looking in the aggregate, and we're looking at obviously the increase in the number of applicants. And then of course we have that increase in valuation. And I don't know if, because that would actually, them not to go up because they're hitting that limitation. So I don't know how that's would impact this.
So does that limitation increase when the county average value of the house goes up? How does that work? Or is that in statute, how much the limitation is on homestead exemption?
I thought it was in statute. I'll get that information to you though.
Senator Dorn.
Thank you for being here today. And my question is, the first year in the income tax, property tax credit fund, we had 125 million in credits available. And I believe that first year they were maybe in the 65-75% range of use. Do you have an update on that? And then also this year's the 548 million, just a percentage, if you know roughly a percentage or of what has been, I call it pulled, or I don't know what else to use it, yeah.
So claimed is what I would call it.
Claims, okay.
And so this morning I did check. We did update it in our system in February 24th, so it's not the newest information.
Close enough.
But it's, and I don't have a percentage, but I do have, so for, so I'll start with 2020, that was 125 million. And that's claimed of 80,142,100 as of February 24th. And then 21, get my notes here.
That would have been
548
Yeah.
was the amount there. And so that is 394,289,428.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then this year we're about 36 million of the 548. And we're actually a little ahead this year than we were last year.
You said you're ahead of the normal, or what it's been in the normal pace.
Yeah, so we're ahead where we were last year, and then we're getting about 100, probably, what we call PTXs a day. Those are folks who are amending previous returns. So we're seeing a lot of activity of folks amending previous returns.
All right, so yes, the 2020 tax returns filed in 2021 have a 3-year statute of limitations. And so they have till April 15th of 2024 to claim 2020, 2021 would be the following year even. So none of them have been excluded from claiming. The figures you gave are approximately 64% for the 2020 tax year and 72% for the 2021 tax year. And of course, 2020 was a 6% credit. 2021 was 25.3%. And so I think the 6% credit for some people wasn't enough credit to pay the tax preparer to do it.
I will say though, the PTX is really easy. I mean, and that's what I've been telling folks is that it's super easy, just mail it into us and then you'll get either a direct refund to your account or you can get a check.
Very good. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Okay.
Is there anyone here wishing to testify on the Department of Revenue's budget?
I will say that David Geyer.
Oh, excuse me. Welcome, Mr. Geyer.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is David, D-A-V-I-D, Geyer, G-E-I-E-R. I'm here because our program receives administrative support from the Department of Revenue as a result of a bill passed in 2013. So our budget appears kind of as an appendix or a rump.
Would you give your title and your division?
Sure. I'm the director of the Nebraska Gambler Assistance Program. The program is the sole activity of the Nebraska Commission on Problem Gambling. So the Commission on Problem Gambling is my employer. It's a state agency, small agency, 2-person staff. I'm here today to ask the committee to reconsider your preliminary recommendation to eliminate our program's appropriation of $250,000 each year from the healthcare cash fund. The governor's budget bill did propose that we should continue to receive that appropriation. There's a handout being delivered to you. It has a bit of background about the commission and our program and outlines my points today. When you look over that handout, you see we are funded mainly with money from Nebraska gambling. The transfers from the healthcare cash fund to the Gamblers Assistance Fund have been authorized since 2005. We earmark 100% of this fund transfer for counseling services. Counseling services is our primary obligation under the statute that created the Commission on Problem Gambling. I understand that the recommendation to eliminate this fund transfer is based on predicted casino tax revenue. So far, predictions of the amount of that revenue have been wrong, not just a little, but by about 700%. We have a ways to go before we know how much to expect. This makes planning program activities very difficult. To be sure you understand how the law is set up for the distribution of the casino tax, the tax is equal to 20% of the amount that the casinos keep from gamblers. So that's the gross amount of the tax, 20%. Of that 20%, 70% goes to the property tax relief fund, straight over. Another 20% is divided between the cities and counties where the casinos are located. So in Lincoln, for example, 10% goes to Lincoln, 10% to Lancaster County. The remaining 5% is divided half between our program and the general fund. So we get 2.5% of the tax, the same amount that goes into the general fund. So far, that tax has produced a little over $100,000 to our program, whereas the projection 2 years ago was that we would receive 1.2 million over this biennium. If things go as they appear to be going during the current biennium, instead of 1.2 million, we will receive about 225,000. That's the difficulty and the precarious nature of predicting what's going to happen with this gambling tax. We have a plan for the coming biennium for how we would use that casino tax in whatever amount it turns out to be, but we want to add it to our historical revenue sources, including the healthcare cash fund money. We don't want to replace any of our historic revenue sources, but add it to it. And on the handout I gave you, there's a little bit of an outline of where we get that money. We need to use the new money from the casino tax to get ready for what we know is coming with the introduction of local slot machines and sports betting. You see on the handout there what we plan to do with the added revenue that we think may come in. First on our to-do list is workforce development. We are in a familiar situation. Too few trained counselors where we need them and a hard time recruiting new ones. Before we sign up new counselors, we have to train them. Addiction professionals recommend specialty training in addiction to gambling is not just another addiction, it has some unique and challenging characteristics. Yet the subject of addiction to gambling is not part of the curriculum in the colleges and universities that teach new counselors. There's no generally accepted nationwide training on addiction to gambling. Each state is on its own. We created our current training in 2014. It is outdated. We have looked forward to the added casino tax revenue to give us the ability to replace that training. After we train counselors, we have to figure out how to pay them. Pay has been an issue for this program for many years. It's a 30-year-old program. Gaining the ability to pay counselors at better rates is another need we're counting on casino tax to help pay for. We at least need to keep up with Medicaid. If Medicaid rates are increased by 5% this year, and another 5% next year, we have to keep up with that. When we tell counselors the rate we're paying is 20% below what they could get from Medicaid, they lose interest in our program. Over the next biennium, we expect counseling demand to increase, in effect compounding our counseling expenditures. New counselors will mean more new clients and more counseling service to pay for. Next on my list that I gave you is baseline studies. We are asked this question a lot: how many people in Nebraska have this problem? Recent state-by-state studies are finding prevalence rates much higher than some old national studies. But we cannot rely on other states. Each state's gambling culture is different. We've been in discussions with the Racing and Gaming Commission about this. Both commissions believe it is important for Nebraska to get our own facts. Start with the baseline now, then after a few years, after casinos are up and running, do it again. That is the only way to get our own facts about the impact of this new gambling in our state. My last point is about the uncertainty of gaming tax revenue. We believe that eliminating an important source of our program revenue now, the transfer from the healthcare cash fund, when casinos are still early in the startup phase, it's premature. As we watch and wait for the casinos to come into full operation, we hope to use the new revenue that comes in along the way to do things we have been unable to afford to do until now, by adding it to the historical and reliable revenue sources that I've outlined for you. That includes the transfer from the healthcare cash fund. So as you work on this budget, we ask you to consider our need to prepare for the changes we know are coming. The healthcare cash fund appropriation should be part of what we're allowed to use to do that. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for that information. Now, is there anyone else wanting to testify regarding the Department of Revenue budget? Seeing none, do we have any position statements? We have no position statements for the record. That will conclude Agency 16. We will now invite Agency 35, Liquor Control Commission. We'll open that hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Hobert Rupe, H-O-B-E-R-T, R-U-P-E. I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director of the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission. I want to thank the committee and for all its hard work. And, you know, it's always nice when we start off with, I agree with the budgets, the agency's budget requests. It more accurately reflects from our initial submission. You know, we, as small agencies, we have to figure this out based on the numbers we've got, and that was pre the NAPE contract. And so I believe that the change here represents most of those changes, and I appreciate that. One of the great things about the NAPE contract is some of the people who are getting the best raises are my accountants. I've been having trouble filling some of those positions because you can start as an assistant manager. Casey's making more than an accountant position, an entry-level accountant position for the state of Nebraska. And those three positions are responsible for the collection of approximately $36.5 million per year in excise tax, which goes to the general fund. The commission is the second largest contributor to the general fund, although the largest one sitting behind me at revenue, so that's like an elephant and a mouse, but it's okay. I don't come behind them. I also want to thank that the committee is recommending the reapportionment of the camp funds that were originally appropriated in 2021. As you're aware, the commission was using a service which went originally online in 1988. This new system, we have gone with Computronics as our vendor. We're in stage 3 of 6. The plan would be to go live date in the second quarter of 2024. We're currently in the fit gap process. This would be a comprehensive alcohol management program. which is going to revolutionize the way we process applications and also taxes. It's going to make it much easier for the users, primary licensees, to file corporate changes, to file applications, to make updates. It's going to make for a more fair, more accurate tax assessment, especially if we, if the brand registration bill, which is part of, has been on your agenda for a couple days and got a couple hours of the other day, is part of the general affairs priority bill, which will make it much more clear as to allow us to track the new alcohol products. Back when the system, when I first started, it was pretty clear what a beer was, what a liquor was, and what a wine was. Now you've got a whole host of other products, and the wonderful thing about them is two incredibly similar products can be taxed at two entirely different tax rates. And so it's really difficult for us because either do the online brand registration and to help us on that, or get me more auditors. And I think this is the far more appropriate way to do it. But with that, I would be happy to answer any questions regarding the commission's job or our budget, or any questions about how camp is going. Once again, I thank this committee for its previous support, and for, I believe the plan is for the reallocation of the continuing funds for it.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you, and for that, I will go back to work.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify regarding the Liquor Control Commission? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 35. Next is Agency 93, Tax Equalization and Review Commission. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Rob Hotz, R-O-B-H-O-T-Z. I'm one of three commissioners with Tax Equalization and Review Commission. Thank you for the budget process this year. We believe that the committee's recommendation, the preliminary recommendation, would be sufficient for us, and we're not asking for anything. If I can answer any, I know there are some members of the committee who are new, and maybe some who are new to the legislature as well. If I can answer any questions you may have about what Tax Equalization Review Commission does, and so on, I'd be happy to do that.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Dorn?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate this. Approximately how long a wait when somebody has a protest or with you or whatever, or it's forwarded from a county on, approximately how long a wait are you right now on those?
That's a moving target answer. The best way to answer it, I think, is that if you were to take 2023, the effective date for taxes January 1, those will get protested in June
this year.
The county board will consider those protests in July and August. We won't see them until August, September. And in mid-September, we'll see about half of all the appeals that we get within about a 3-day period. We typically get on average about 1,500 appeals, and they all come right then in that tight time frame. So for 2023, we won't see any of those appeals until August and September of 23. And if we get 1,500, everybody's in line at that point. So we're already 9 months behind at that point, depending upon how you look at it. We do some jurisdictional hearings. We schedule here the appeals for hearing. And if we work like clockwork and got a year's worth of appeals done within 1 year, we'd be done in September of 24 for the January 1, 23 effective date. If we were efficient, that's the way it would work out. We'd be a year and 9 months behind. So the answer to the question would be we're something farther than that behind, but that's a bit of a moving target because of a vast number of variables that affect litigation generally. These are evidentiary hearings, Sometimes there are lawyers all over the place, and sometimes there are taxpayers who are unrepresented. Each presents different challenges and processes and so on.
When you said they're not prioritized, or listed or whatever, the 1,500, is there, you said there's three of you. Does one of you take, I call it the corporations and one, or is it just general in order?
We don't take them in the order that they're filed necessarily. One thing that we do that would fit in prioritization, I guess you could say, is for those who filed last September, August and September for 2022, this summer, if they're beyond Grand Island, Kearney, and so on into western Nebraska, we typically travel out for several weeks and go to places like Scottsbluff, Norfolk, Kearney, wherever there are pockets of appeals. We chase after those and go to those places just to make it more efficient for the taxpayers and for the county officials. We send 2 commissioners and a recording clerk and go out and do those. So those usually are done a little bit earlier, the western Nebraska appeals. What becomes more problematic is when you get a little bit behind, now you're looking at 2 years. And so some taxpayers will file again an appeal, and we'll be then dealing with 2 years in one hearing, sometimes more. And it's litigation, so sometimes there are continuances requested for a variety of reasons. We have to decide what to do with those. COVID certainly set us back a little bit. If you have one person that's necessary to be at that hearing and they can't make it, you just can't have it. You have to reschedule it. So we did have a fair amount of that going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here wishing to testify regarding the Tax Equalization and Review Commission budget? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing for Agency 93. We'll now open the hearing for Agency 24, Department of Motor Vehicles. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Rhonda Lamb, RHONDALAHM, Director of the Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today in support of the governor's budget recommendation and share information regarding the agency budget submittal. Let me begin by thanking the committee for the time and effort expended in the preliminary review of the agency budget. We appreciate your current as well as past support of the department's efforts to better serve the residents of Nebraska. Over the last few years, one of the customer service improvements deployed has been enhancements to our lobby management system. This improves our ability to influence the flow of customers in a specific office, thus providing customers more control over their interaction with us and decreasing wait times. Our lobby management contract will expire in February of 2025, and we've exhausted all of the renewal options allowed under the state's procurement rules. At this time, we will need to initiate a new procurement process to continue providing the enhanced services the lobby management system provides. The requested appropriation will allow us to continue with the current service level and expand additional enhancements like text message notifications and reminders and customer feedback on quality of service provided. In 2019, the DMV deployed a completely modernized system for the registration and titling of motor vehicles and the collection and distribution of related taxes and fees. The system collects and distributes over $850 million annually. The requested appropriation is to replace servers for this project, which will ensure the integrity of this system the state relies on for the collection of nearly $1 billion per year and allow the agency to continue protecting the personal information of Nebraska residents. In the agency budget submission, the balance of the DMV cash fund reflects a negative number at the end of the biennium. To address this issue, Senator Mosier, at the request of the department, introduced LB 465. This bill reallocates the portion of the document fees currently going to the general fund to the DMV cash fund, a $4,300,000 annual impact that was included in the governor's budget recommendation. The bill was heard in committee on January 31st, 2023, and voted out of committee and placed on general file by a unanimous vote on February 15th, 2023. For the last several years, fixed costs such as salaries, benefits, postage, OCIO rates, printing, DAS rates, and specialized paper supplies such as title paper, registration paper, handicap placards, and et cetera, have increased at a higher rate than revenues. The DMV has historically been very prudent with the appropriation authorized by the legislature. In the last several years, we have not spent our authorized appropriation, which is why we have not had to address the imbalance of revenue versus cost increase until now. Over the last 6 years, we've been able to keep over $18 million in the bank, so to speak, by being judicious with our appropriation. The fiscal impact of the general fund from LB 465 was included in the budget recommendation from the governor and reallocates funds instead of raising fees. I would like to take a couple of minutes to provide the committee updates on the 2 agency modernization projects authorized by the legislature in recent years. The first of those projects is the modernization of the motor carrier system. This system registers, titles, and collects and distributes the fees for the commercial motor carriers registered in Nebraska, as well as those carriers who travel within our state and are required to pay fees to Nebraska. LB 113 passed in 2021, directed the department to modernize the motor carrier system by July 1st of 2025. We have drafted the request for proposal. It has been released for bidders. The proposals have been returned, and we are currently in the process of scoring the proposals. We're scheduled to have a vendor identified this spring, with the project starting as soon as the contract is executed. The targeted completion date is the summer of 2024, well ahead of the statutory mandate. Additionally, in 2021, LB 106 set up the funding mechanism to modernize the driver's license processing and record system and directed the project be completed by July 1 of 2032. A high-level project timeline has been completed, and the RFP for the consultant is done and at the Department of Administrative Services for review prior to being released for bidders. This is a large project which involves numerous partners and stakeholders. Based on similar projects in other states, it will take 3.5 to 4 years to develop and deploy the system once a vendor is selected. I want to thank you for your preliminary approval for the consultant, as it is a critical piece in getting the request for proposal, which will become the contract with the vendor, ready to be released. The completeness and accuracy of the proposal will serve as a foundation for a successful project. These modernization projects will provide a significant difference in how we are able to serve the residents of Nebraska. Thank you for your time today, and I would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Wishart.
Thank you, Director, for being here today. And I apologize, I'm losing my voice, but I'll try to speak up. After the modernization projects are complete, if a person is registering a new vehicle, do they still have to come in person?
They do not. They can go online, they can register their vehicle online, and they can renew or redo it each year after that online.
And so if someone were to go out and buy a new vehicle or buy a used vehicle, they would not have to come in person to register that vehicle.
So it depends somewhat on the counties. So we've deployed a number of enhancements to the system since it was deployed. One of those is the ability to be able to title it at the place when you purchase it. So unfortunately, we can't register it at time of purchase because part of the registration is paying the motor vehicle tax. The motor vehicle tax, as you guys are well aware, is distributed between schools and local government. Because of the tax districts, people don't know what tax district they are and they can't register at the time. So when they initially purchase, they're going to have to go in to do that initial registration because of that tax district issue. But then from thereafter, they can register it online, renew it, and register it online.
Okay. Well, that's something I would like to try to push and work out. I think trying to figure out as many ways as possible that someone doesn't have to go in person to DMV, but instead can do it online in those creative ways to make people's lives easier. Because I do know with the Department of Motor Vehicles, it's one of the areas in which Nebraskans still experience wait times in terms of needing to get through a process that's critical for their lives, having mobility. But I appreciate all the work you're doing on modernization and would like to, especially on the purchase of a new vehicle, try to work to make that process even more efficient and have a completely virtual option for somebody to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Senator Armendariz.
Thank you.
So just to add to Senator Wishart's, wouldn't it be simple enough to put in your address in those tax areas, just autofill?
So I think the problem comes in when we modernized our system and we were looking at the tax districts and trying to program those in through GIS mapping into our system. There's, I think, a little over 1,800, you guys probably know for sure, different tax districts. They change because you have to know your school district and you have to know your local tax district. And it isn't always current within what happens at the local level. So when a city annexes, that can change the local tax. It also changes the school potentially of where the school goes. So that's what becomes complicated with that. I don't think anything's impossible. I think that's one of the things you have to look at and see if there's a mechanism to do that. We spent a lot of time looking at that when we modernized our system. And at that time, it wasn't something that we could deploy because of the complexity of the tax districts. But we can continue looking at it. The simple thing, if we could just have all the motor vehicle tax go to you guys, and you guys could just figure out where it goes to, and then we could just give it all to the general fund, and then we wouldn't have to figure it out by tax districts. But I realize that's not realistic, but yeah, I think we get to continue to work.
Question?
Voter ID, thank you. Voter ID just passed in the last election. What percent of Nebraskans have driver's licenses, or what percent do not?
So we have about 1.5 million document holders in the state of Nebraska, but keep in mind that's for the all population, not just above 18. So we've had to do a number of fiscal notes on bills that were introduced for the number of people above 18 that don't have identification cards. And I don't have that number on me today. I can get that number for you, but I think LB 70, LB, I don't remember the LB, but all those voter ID bills that were introduced on our fiscal note for those, we have that number in there, the number of people above 18 that don't currently have IDs in Nebraska based on the 2020 census.
Senator Dover.
Yeah, how would the process be different if you were buying a new car and you went online and went through a form, or sat there in a window and told that person, or checked a box or a piece of paper, whatever? How would that process be different?
So the county, so it's done by the county treasurers, not employees of my department. That's done by the county treasurer's office. And so they look it up and they ask them questions like, so if they ask them one question, then at least the next question. So it would be developing that iterative process electronically. So I think it's something that we can look at. It seems like it should be simple. It's not as simple as it seems like it should be, but it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Doesn't it make sense if you computerize something, an if then or whatever type statement, like if this, then that, or whatever, wouldn't that be more efficient and save on payroll if it was done, with technology as opposed to an individual looking things up?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We are definitely in the mode of doing technology. I think part of it is the changes that happen and our timely notification of those changes. It's very similar when those changes are made at the local level. Sometimes we do or do not know about them or made aware of them. It's the same thing with sales tax. We oftentimes don't get notified. That was changed in legislation that they're supposed to notify us within 90 days of the effective date. But all those things impact that system because we collect all those fees for local jurisdictions. And the timely notification to make sure that we can get it in and get it deployed timely to make it accurate is also one of the contributing factors.
Is it a problem between two different systems that don't talk to each other?
Not for vehicle registration titling. That's all done in one system. It used to be a part of, before we modernized, almost like 93 little separate county systems, but not anymore. I mean, that's very efficient, and it's a very good system that can be changed and modernized much easier than our former system.
Is
So I think
there
it's the way
anything that we could do to help you to facilitate or speed up a little bit more? Or?
I would want to talk to my programming experts in the department and see, and the actual company, the vendor who owns the program, that, and see what they say. I mean, they do this in other states, so they actually started out as a company making systems for taxes. So they're pretty experienced at doing tax things. So I think the first place I would want to start is have a conversation with them and see how we can.
You could just, Senator Dover, if you could just let me know what you find out, and I don't know if it'd be, some other people interested, I'm sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Wishart?
Along the lines of Senator Lippincott's questions, with voter ID coming through the legislature now, my assumption is that there will need to be free state IDs for individuals over 18. So what is the Department of Motor Vehicles plan for being able to provide those free IDs? Are you going to utilize just the state IDs that we already have?
So when the bills that I'm recalling are all very similar in terms of that, the people above 18 would be provided a free identification card. So our fiscal notes that we responded have been all similar in that regard, that would be the standard ID that we provide everyone else. I mean, it would be just like everybody else's ID, except for obviously it would have no fee attached to it.
Okay, so somebody then who wants to go and register to vote would just come to the DMV or anywhere, go and register, and then come in and would be provided a free state ID.
So I don't know how it will be operative when it's out, but the bills I've seen is they would come in, it would be the same process, and the federal laws for voting requires that anybody, when they have interaction with the Department of Motor Vehicles, must be afforded the opportunity to register to vote. So if they come in to get an identification card or a license or whatever they're doing, they have to be afforded the opportunity to register to vote. And then at that same time, then they'd be issued their ID, the similar process that we use for everyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Dorn?
Well, thank you, Senator Clemens, and thank you for being here. Mine is more about the Hall and the Madison County facilities. Are those new buildings or?
So what those would end up being is we're required by state law to put it out to bid. So we would put out the specification to bid, and bidders would return those. And sometimes we get bids on existing facilities and sometimes on new builds. In Omaha, we have 2 buildings that were existing, that were remodeled, and we have one that was a new build. So it all falls into those requirements by state law with the purchasing. So when we put them out, then that is handled with Department of Administrative Services. Then they would notify potential landowners, property owners that it's out there. And I think they work with like commercial realty companies that know what's on the market to let them know it's available.
It also shows in here that you're increasing the annual operating cost by $325,000.
So that would be the rent for the facility primarily.
And
That's
that
what
would
that
be
would
the
be.
rent.
Right. That would be primarily. what
So
that
we really need to add the 2 together then. I call it the one-time cost for Madison County of $170.
Right.
But that's what DAS then will bill you.
So the one-time cost would be things like the furniture, the pieces, the things that you'd have to get to set it up. And then the ongoing costs are primarily rent, but we also would have ongoing costs for a courier, for money, ongoing costs for security. Those are the things. When we do a rent, when the state, usually when they rent a facility, it's what is called all-inclusive rent. So the rent includes snow removal, utilities, cleaning, lawn care and all that. That's all included as part of the rent. And so when you see a budget that says there's a rent increase, that's usually because those rent contracts, when we execute the contract over 10 years, 20 years or whatever, they have that built in for each year. That's why you probably see that in agency budgets, at least in ours. And then usually as part of those contracts, they'll say like in the 5th year, then, or whatever year, you're going to get $30,000 to do improvements on the facility, which is what we're doing in Omaha South right now.
Thank you.
Further questions? I have information from the fiscal analyst. 1,336,000 people have Nebraska driver's licenses. 94,000 have state ID cards. It's estimated that 46,000 people would need to, an ID, would qualify for a state ID, which is 3% of those numbers.
That sounds right.
Thank you. I had a question. When a bank obtains a lien on a vehicle title, it's now handled with the electronic system. Can't remember the name of that system. Can you tell me?
The electronic lien and title, I think it's just called electronic lien and title.
Is that, we're using a software system at the bank. Is there a change in that system that you're working on with this modernization?
So our vehicle title and registration system that was modernized and deployed in October of 19 included the current electronic lien and title process. There's a nationwide movement to go to complete electronic titles where there would never be a paper title. Now, I only know of one state where that's getting to a point where they're nearing that full cycle. There's a lot of people, as you can imagine, that are in that conversation because you have lenders, you have dealers, you have junk and salvage interested parties. So to get a complete electronic title where we never have a paper title, we're not there yet. And that's probably a little ways in the future.
The bank sends in the paper title,
Right.
you destroy it, and is that right?
So we have it and we file it for a period of time, then it's electronic, and then once it's paid off, then we send notice of that and keep the electronic title on record. And then if somebody wants a paper title, they can get a paper title printed.
Yeah, when the lien is released, then yes, the bank is, what we're doing, you're issuing a new title with no lien on it.
Right.
All right, all right, that's not changing. That was just my question. Any other questions? Seeing none.
Thank you very much for your
Director.
time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on the Department of Motor Vehicles? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 24. We will welcome a representative for Agency 27, Department of Transportation.
Hi.
Welcome, Director.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Vicki Kramer, VICKI-KRAMER, and I'm the Director of the Nebraska Department of Transportation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and appear before the committee in support of the governor's budget recommendation for the upcoming biennium. We at NDOT greatly appreciate the support of this committee and the legislature. It is because of your support and appropriations that Nebraska has a well-maintained transportation system. NDOT's core mission is delivering projects, maintaining and operating our current assets, and serving the surface transportation and aviation industries in the most effective and efficient way to provide the best possible statewide transportation system for the movement of people and goods. I did go ahead and put together a packet that explained our funding, and I'll go through it next. But I wanted to make sure that all members of the committee had an updated list of how we're funded, what goes into the considerations of the choices that we make, and what the future looks like in regards to IIJA and a couple of the other things that have changed since we last appeared before you. So that's what you have in front of you. So in terms of a brief overview of how we're funded, on the surface transportation side, the department is funded primarily by the revenue collected through transportation-related user fees, such as gas tax, sales tax on motor vehicles, and motor vehicle registration fees, which are directed into the Highway Trust Fund. This fund includes money for state as well as cities and counties. And NDOT's portion is transferred to the Highway Cash Fund. Our aeronautics division is funded in a very similar process through aviation fuel tax, which is directed to the Aeronautics Cash Fund. This approach ensures that revenue generated from transportation is spent on transportation. When it comes to surface transportation, stability and predictability are essential to planning, aided by the fact we have a relatively consistent revenue stream, which has been extended by the legislature, has been through laws such as the Build Nebraska Act. When planning to utilize funds, we often take state funds and match them with federal funds. Since the last biennium budget, there have been a number of large-scale federal laws passed, such as the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, and the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. These laws contain various programs which will dedicate additional money through formula funding and targeted discretionary grants to Nebraska. However, these federal funds require a state match before they can be used, typically at a ratio of 80-20 for surface transportation and 90-10 for aviation. So this increase means there's a need to increase state funds to maximize our utilization of federal funds. When state funding is insufficient, it can jeopardize the maximum utilization of these funds. This then results in delayed projects and increased costs. NDOT's cash flow is closely monitored and purposely managed to ensure taxpayer dollars are being efficiently spent on the transportation system to provide a meaningful boost to the state's economy. But there may be unexpected situations such as the influx of federal dollars in the IIJA, which require additional attention in our budget. This takes me to the governor's budget recommendation for the department's budget. While there are, of course, recurring expenses incurred by the department, I want to primarily focus on the budget issues we've identified that would allow for improved efficiency on project delivery and capacity. As noted, the IIJA provides a number of opportunities to the state. It increases our federal funding by about 15% on our traditional program and about 38% when you take into account specific programs that the IIJA mandates that money be spent in. But in order to obligate these funds, there's a 20% match as stated. So NDOT is requesting the required match totaling $100 million be transferred from the cash reserves. Otherwise, NDOT must provide the $100 million match from the highway cash fund, which would create a deficit and necessitate a rise in the gas tax. We believe this money will provide a large return on investment and maximize the safety of the traveling public. Our system connects people to essential places, work, school, healthcare, and provides a framework for economic growth through asset preservation and capital improvement projects. Examples of these projects include Union to Murray on Highway 34, multiple projects on Dodge Street in Omaha, improvements to Highway 136 just outside of Beatrice, resurfacing on Highway 82 north of Madison, work on Highway 30 between Bushnell and Kimball, and reconstructing a viaduct in Central City on Highway 14. The one connection with all of these projects is their asset preservation projects that are meant to increase the capacity, increase the quality of current projects or current roads. Beyond the request regarding the deployment of IIJA funds to expedite project delivery, NDOT has a number of specified issues that will allow us to maintain the state system as needed. If you have any questions regarding these line items, I'd be happy to answer them. With that, I'd like to thank you again for the preliminary recommendation to approve the governor's recommendation for the budget, and also reiterate my appreciation to the committee. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clemens, and thank you for being here. You talked about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that 100 million that we would need to have, that's our match.
Yep, over 3 years. Yes, Senator.
Okay, that was over a 3-year program. And without the state match, and you gave a couple options where it might come from, those funds wouldn't be coming here.
Correct. We'd come out, well, they would come out of our current budget, so it would create an impact to our existing program.
You would take it out of the current budget, so that would mean less other projects than would get funded.
Less capacity because it would come out of asset preservation.
About the bids you've been putting out this, I call it fall and winter, about what kind of an increase have you been seeing?
It varies, Senator. I've got a lot of concerns when it comes to what our capacity and what inflation are doing to our business right now. I think I shared that we've seen anywhere from 9 to 20% inflation right now. So it varies by the type of job that we're letting. So I hate to give a specific number, but I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you for the general amount and stuff. There's definitely an increase. I should have asked it that way.
Absolutely. Across the industry. Absolutely.
Across the industry. So, but in retrospect, when you look at a bigger picture, then as that increase goes up, and if you're kind of a level funding, we will have less projects being done.
I think that what the department is looking at right now with our current program with Build Nebraska Act and sales tax and having the ability to manage capacity that way, we feel as though we're in a good place with IIJA increases. Like I said, we did have a 15% formula increase with IIJA, so that helps offset some of the inflation that we're seeing. But I do want to make sure that I bring it up because I think that there's a lot of ideas out there that IIJA will have a huge impact when you couple it with inflation and the fact that that 15% is across formula. And what you're really seeing is the 38% number being publicized. Those are special programs that have very strict rules on how I can spend that funding.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Lippincott.
A lot of these are requests here that you have, and I live near Central City.
Yes.
Viaduct, That's a request by the governor, is that correct? It hasn't been approved yet?
No, that project is just an example of a project that we have in our asset preservation program that's currently moved forward.
So it's not a sure thing yet.
It's programmed. So if it's in our 1-year program, it's programmed. I see as what you're saying is, so you typically we publish the 1 year and the 5-year plan. And so as they move in, and nothing's 100% permanent until it's actually let, right? Or until it started construction.
No time in the future when it's going to happen.
I'd have to get and see when that next little letting's gonna come out this year.
Thanks.
You mentioned $100 million, that's over 3 years, you said?
Yes, so it goes back to the deficit request of 23 and then goes through 24 and 25. So just given the timing of IIJA, we had to come at this time. We weren't able to give you those numbers last year.
What budget action has been taken so far regarding that? Pardon?
We did.
All right. The cash reserve?
Yeah.
Request. Okay, I couldn't find my notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's, funding is allocated to you then, right? Very good. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Now welcome other testifiers regarding the Department of Transportation budget.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Sean Kelly, S-E-A-N-K-E-L-E-Y, and I am here today as a registered lobbyist on behalf of American Metro Area Transit. Metro offers fixed route, express commuter, circulator, and origin to destination paratransit bus services throughout the Douglas and Sarpy counties, serving a territory of approximately 100 square miles. I'm here today to support program number 305 of Agency 27, but also request an increase to program number 305. The reason we are requesting this is due to the decrease Metro has experienced last fiscal year and this fiscal year in the program. In what I'm passing out, or what the page is passing out, you'll see a wide variation from funds received by Metro. This variation is attributed to the method for which transit agencies are funded in the state of Nebraska. Rural agencies are funded first and Metro is funded last. The state assistance we receive is determined by the need in rural Nebraska. So last, I would just note that this program has remained flat from a state appropriation level since 2015. We're grateful for your time and would appreciate your consideration. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Do you have a dollar amount request?
That's a great question. I was considering the same. I think a $2 million request would keep Metro whole. But again, we don't really know what the total need of the rest of the state is. So it's kind of a moving number, but I think 2 million would be the ceiling to remain full for the next biennium. But it is a little bit of a moving target.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony. Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you. Are there other testifiers regarding Department of Transportation budget? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 27. We'll now open the hearing for Agency 31, Military Department. Welcome, General.
Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, I am Major General Daryl Bohack, D-A-R-Y-L B-O-H-A-C, the Adjutant General of the Nebraska Military Department, here today to discuss Agency 31's budget request. Before highlighting a few key areas of significance within the budget, I'd like to provide the committee with a high-level overview of the Nebraska Military Department and its directorates. The Nebraska Military Department consists of two entities, the Nebraska National Guard and the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency. both of which I lead as the Adjutant General and Director respectively. The Nebraska National Guard is further divided into the Air National Guard and the Army National Guard, each led by an Assistant Adjutant General. The Nebraska Military Department receives over 90% of its budget from the federal government. This includes the pay and allowances for our military members and civilian employees, as well as equipment we utilize to perform state and federal missions. The remaining 10% is funded by the state, which allows the agency to fund construction projects, salaries, and other programs not covered by federal resources. Funding for the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency is a mixture of federal grants and state contributions. The blended funding provides the agency flexibility on how to best address the needs of Nebraskans before, during, and after environmental and man-made emergencies. I'd be remiss in not thanking Governor Pillen for considering our budget proposal and providing open lines of communication on the specific and ever-evolving needs of the Nebraska Military Department. I'm also grateful for this committee's preliminary markup. I support the governor's biennial budget recommendations for the Nebraska Military Department, which provide critical funding for several of our priorities, such as assisting with salaries and benefits to attract and retain talent within our organization, construction efforts to continue modernization programs that coincide with state-specific needs, and federal military construction contributions, and to position the agency to be equipped and prepared to provide timely emergency response and mitigation efforts. I'm also grateful for and support the governor's recommendations for a capital construction request. Each of these represent an investment in our facilities, which support our ability to train and prepare our soldiers and airmen and units for combatant commander requirements across the globe. Just as importantly, these same facilities often become the staging and operational centers for our responses in the state whenever we experience disasters or other events such as civil unrest or pandemics. Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee for your time today. I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, Senator Lippincott?
Do we have adequate applicants signing up for the enlisted and also the officer positions?
So it's two different stories. For the Army and the Air National Guard, we do well in recruiting. In the Air National Guard, we benefit from the presence of Offutt Air Force Base and active component members wishing to stay in the great state of Nebraska. So they very often will join the Air National Guard. We're also having a lot of success in recruiting off the street for those missions. The Army National Guard is a bit more challenging this year. In the last year, last federal fiscal year, which ended on September 30th of last year, we only hit 50% of our recruiting target. We're at about 91% strength of authorizations in the Nebraska Army National Guard. That's too low in terms of filling our units. Yet we haven't failed in meeting any mission requirements that we've been given. So we have some challenges. Some of that's COVID related. Our relationships got, I won't say broken, but they were diminished during COVID because of lack of access to the schools, which is where we do build relationships with sophomores and juniors who then are making decisions about things like college. Am I going to join the service? What are the other kinds of things I'm going to do? So we're rebuilding those relationships now.
And as far as the enlisted and also the officers, what do they cite as the main reason for them to join the military?
Well, I would say many of them cite educational benefits as the reason to join it. It gives them the ability to go to school or pay for school and reduce their debt coming out of whether it's a 2-year program, 4-year program, or other kinds of certificate program.
Other questions?
One additional question regarding that. What percent do folks that are formally enlisted, they get their degree, and then they go on and become officers?
I'd say it's fairly common. I don't have a specific percentage. I can only tell you my own history. I was 10 years enlisted before they decided I wasn't going to be successful as an enlisted member. It encouraged me to be a commissioned officer. So yeah. That's not an unusual story.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clements, and thank you for being here. I guess mine's more a follow-up question on last summer with all of our wildfires and stuff, and I know you guys were part of that and part of everything going on. And I saw the request for 2 million more in aid. If I saw that right, maybe I read it wrong or whatever, maybe it's to fill it back up, but talk a little bit about that if you could.
So our governor's emergency fund has a significant amount of money in it that was appropriated by the legislature to enable our response to the 2019 floods. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $580 million damage to public infrastructure for which the state incurs a cost share. So we wanted to be sure we had the money available when those projects come due to help local political subdivisions, counties, cities to pay for the project. So there's a fair amount of money there. The appropriation for the governor's emergency fund is $5 million. And the reason for that is we have a long-standing agreement with Appropriations and the legislature that we should always maintain a $5 million base in that fund. That our historical average tells us that that's what we should have there at all times to ensure that we can respond in a timely way. So we're grateful for that appropriation. There is a $2 million transfer out of the governor's emergency fund that was part of LB 1198, which was the money the legislature appropriated for the COVID response using state funds. But because we got coronavirus relief funds and other resources, we're returning that money back to the cash reserve.
We talk a little bit about the fire part.
Oh, yes, sir.
Sorry.
So yes, it was a very busy year. We used to talk about having a fire season in the state of Nebraska, usually considered to be from June or July till the end of September. I would tell you it's year round, given the conditions we face, particularly in drought conditions. We had a couple of very large fires, one 33,000 acre fire, another 40,000 acre fire, plus other fires in the state. I think one weekend we had as many as 16 different fires burning. We didn't respond to all of those because local fire departments, volunteer fire departments are pretty good at managing small grass fires and others. But we did join in one fire in south central Nebraska that became a fire that required federal assets to defeat. It came up out of Kansas with very strong winds and moved quite fast. And the same out by Scottsbluff Gearing, where we did have another large fire out there as well. But a couple of things. One is we stood up and have funded a type 2 incident management team, which means these are locals and us from the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, the Fire Marshal's Office, and State Forestry Service that come together to provide technical expertise to help manage fire response when locals are feeling overwhelmed. And that only happens when they ask us to come in. We just don't show up and try to take over. I want to be clear about that. So that asset plus we retain a single engine aerial tanker in the state between July and September, which it tends to be the peak season. That asset can be deployed really with a phone call and responds to knockdown fires very quickly. So that's enabled us to get after things much more effectively. So it's the point here, Senator, it's a great partnership from the local level all the way up through the state level to manage the response.
Thank you very much.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Lippincott.
Are we in line to get new tankers?
So Senator Lippincott is asking, because he's an Air Force guy, can't help himself, to get new air refueling tankers. We're not in line in terms of being a named unit to get them, but we are advocating and to be in line to get there. It's the acquisition program for the KC-46 Pegasus is going to be going on for a while yet. I think they have a program buy of, I want to say 179 new tankers. We will still be flying these tankers, the KC-135, probably until the 2040s, maybe the 2050s. And to put that in perspective, the tankers on our ramp here in Nebraska were built between 1957 and 1963. I suspect nobody in this room is driving a vehicle that old, but yet we're still flying them. And that's a testament to our great maintainers.
Senator Dover.
Well, two questions. I wasn't going to ask this one until this came up, but does that metal over time fatigue? I mean, isn't a structure eventually after it's so old that metal doesn't retain what it needs to stay safe? Or-
Yes, in general, that's true, but with the right maintenance and those airplanes go through something called depot maintenance on a periodic basis down in Oklahoma, where they take the skin all the way off and do some pretty serious metal inspection on them. I still get on those airplanes and I'll fly anywhere with them.
They're all R models, right?
Yes, sir, they are. The R model refers to the type of engine on it, which is a highly efficient engine compared to the old E models. These are Boeing 707 platforms that were over-engineered, quite frankly. It's a great aircraft in terms of its durability. But I don't, probably my comfort level in 2050, now I'm gonna be sitting on a porch somewhere by then, right? But I don't think, then I'd be far more worried about the aircraft. But the aircraft, I think the Air Force is, I know this, that the Air Force is already planning on a third buy of a new generation of air refueling tanker.
And the question I was going to ask actually was any of the current vacancies you have in filling your positions due to retirement? I mean, did you see, I just know a lot of my friends just kind of retired.
Yes.
I didn't know if that hit at one time or just the same type of retirement.
Oh, you're talking about the military vacancies, sir?
Yeah. Sorry.
So it's a blend of retirements, people who elect to leave the service during they may serve 6 years and leave or 12 years and leave and decide not to finish out to 20 years. So it's fairly varied in the reasons for departure.
Other questions? Well, I wanted to discuss the tuition assistance program 548.
Yes, sir.
We've had some confusion on the cap. Currently, the cap is $900,000.
Correct.
And I had the page give you that page from our budget book.
Yes, sir.
Showing currently the appropriation is $852,000. And so that's 47,200 short of the 900,000 already. And then we've heard that there could be another 40,000 above the 900,000 needed. And I would just like to clarify what you think the need is going to be for that program in the next 2 fiscal years.
Of course. So if I may, I'd like to discuss LB 52 just briefly, the bill that Senator Lippincott introduced and then was amended by Senator Lowe on the floor to remove the cap completely from the statute. So in the statutes that govern Program 548, which is the National Guard Tuition Assistance Program, there were two basic controls in there. One was an appropriation cap. So it doesn't give us any money. It just says this is the most money you could ever receive. And the other was the number of participants, which is 1,200. It was my belief, and I asked for and got permission last year to have LB 52 introduced, initially increasing the cap to 1 million, but ultimately now removing it. Because I believe that's what the budget process is for, and that's what this committee is for, and the legislative body to manage the appropriation process, not having artificial caps in the statutes. So that's what LB 52 is about. It wasn't going to give us any more money. It was just going to reduce the ceiling. So currently, and I think when Senator Lippincott testified in introducing the bill, and sir, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we gave you you asked for and gave a preliminary forecast of a potential shortfall of $47,000. As we go through the year, so what students do is they come in, our National Guard members apply for the program. If they're in good standing, they're eligible. And they oftentimes they're very savvy. They will ask for 18 hours when they only maybe need 15 hours as a placeholder. And then when they get, show up for classes and they decide, well, 18 is not what I'm going to do. I'm only going to take 15. So we're always working with that gap. So today we estimate a potential shortfall of $33,000 by the end of the year in order to honor all requests by those currently requesting tuition assistance.
That's just through June 30th of this year.
Yes, sir, that's correct. And 852, 793 was the base appropriation last year as well. But we had a reappropriated balance that was added to that of about $35,000, which increased the total appropriation available to us in the second year of the biennium to $887,000, $754. So my concern is with the gap we currently see would take us over the $900,000 ceiling that's currently in statute. So I don't think we have 47,000, Senator. I think we have about 13,000 that we could ask for a deficit request increase to that appropriation, if I understand how the rules work, and that's a really good question. So, is it base appropriation or is the total appropriation in play for the current year?
So 13,000, that would get you to the $900,000 cap.
That's correct.
For fiscal year 23.
That's correct.
And then we're working on the budget for fiscal 24, 25. And what is your expectation for needs there?
Yes, sir. So the two pressures in the program come from Senator Wishart's bill, which passed and the governor signed, to increase tuition assistance from 75% to 100% 2 years ago, so in 21. That came into effect, and that an increase in tuition costs themselves have put pressure on the program and taken us up to our appropriation, consumed it probably completely. So and we have 216 participants currently in the program. We think that could increase, another 20, but we think that's a pretty steady figure to 215 to 250 or so. We think with current costs that in FY24, we would require another $69,000 above the current appropriation request before the committee for 24 and 25. So we need $69,000 each year to probably meet the needs that we see out there.
Okay.
So, the question though, without their bill passing, it will be 900.
It will be capped at 900.
That's what,
Yes,
thank you,
sir.
capped at 900, unless that bill passes.
Senator Wishart.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. This issue that we're talking about is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really glad that Senator Lippincott has taken over leading on this effort. I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about opportunity scholarships, we're talking about Pell Grants, there is an avenue here for Nebraskans to be able to go through college and receive significant tuition assistance if they join the National Guard and give back to their community. And so my question to you is, are you seeing any additional or can we help you at all in getting the word out for this? Because I think there's a ton of Nebraska youth who may not qualify for a different scholarship program, but could get basically a free ride through college if they signed up for the National Guard, which in itself would also be a very beneficial experience.
Yep, thank you for that, Senator. I think in every piece of advertising, we advertise this benefit that the legislature has seen fit to provide our soldiers and airmen. It's one of the reasons I joined. And I used the program when I was actually as a young enlisted person as well. So I think we do a pretty good job of putting the word out. This is why we need to get back in the schools more aggressively or robustly, maybe is a better word, to help spread that word. And also let mom and dad know, hey, we have a resource. We also bring educators out to our facilities, and we bribe them with helicopter rides, but they come out and we get a chance to talk to them about the value we can bring young people, not just the tuition benefits, but leadership training, discipline. They're healthy, fit individuals. And our pitch really goes along the line, let us continue the journey you've started young people on. And we can help you do that, whether it's in the technical trades or whether it's a 4-year degree or other certificate programs. So I think we're doing pretty well with that. Thank you, Senator.
Other questions? Along that line, you said about 216 are participating now.
That's correct.
You recall the number of Air National Guard and Army National Guard in service now that you have?
Oh, the total numbers
Yeah,
in
total
service?
numbers.
Yes, for the Air National Guard, we have about 1,016 members, plus or minus Senator. And then in the Army National Guard, it's right around 3,247, so 3,247, I believe is the number.
Very good. Well, I believe that's the information I was looking for. Any other questions?
And Senator, I would just offer, we can refine these. We'll have, as we move towards the date which you have to settle on a number, we'll work with your office to make sure we're giving you the best data possible at that juncture.
Right, if you have changes, please.
Yes, sir.
Update those.
We
Thank
will
you.
do that.
All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
We have other testifiers regarding the military department. Did the emergency management director care to testify on anything? Did you have any more comments regarding the fire
No, sir.
response?
I'll just expect fires this year with 100%
All right, well, seeing no other testifiers regarding the military department, that closes agency 31, and that is our last item for today. Thank you, committee.